When Skywalker was dismembered and left to burn on the shores of Mustafar, we all know that his potential was cut down dramatically in the Force due to his loss of midichlorians and limbs. His potential was brought down to about 80% of what the Emperor was. We all know that Sidious was pretty upset about this, as the Chosen One's true power would never be fully realized because of this handicap. And not to mention, all of Vader's mental restraints were keeping him from fully achieving the unity that the Force required him to reach his fullest potential. But one thing that no one besides Anakin himself seemed to bat an eye at was the loss of his arm 10 years prior on Geonosis from Count Dooku. It was a very traumatic moment and a thing to happen to the young Skywalker, and yet there wasn't a whole lot of talk about it. Did he lose midichlorian counts when his right arm was taken by Dooku? And furthermore, why wasn't Sidious upset at Dooku for ruining his prized future apprentice? Well, my friends, the answers are here in today's holocron. Needless to say, midichlorians reside in all organic tissue, whether plant, animal, alien, or human, with the sheer number of midichlorians that Skywalker had in every fiber of his being pretty much being filled with them. This being said, any loss of his limbs would result in a drop of his midichlorian count, as it would with anybody else. So yes, Skywalker's midichlorian count was dropped when his arm was severed by Dooku, but this did not affect his power, in fact. But how is this possible? It's a common misconception that midichlorian counts are a representation of one's power, but this is not the truth. The loss of midichlorians does not restrict one's power output, but simply the limits of their potential. Anakin himself had so many midichlorians that even though his potential was slightly cut down on Geonosis, it wasn't a significant enough blow to his power growth to cause any real problems. This is why Sidious wasn't concerned with it at all, and if anything, actually treated it more as an investment rather than a loss. One might think that since Anakin's potential was cut down by a certain percentage, that Sidious would be enraged towards Dooku for damaging his ultimate prize. But actually, it was the opposite. We did a holocron some time ago about how Sidious actually loved Anakin's mechanical arm. In that video, we spoke of how Sidious said that it was perfect because it was an indefinite symbol to the galaxy at large, that Anakin Skywalker was their protector and would do anything to keep them safe. As a politician, Palpatine saw it as the greatest political strategy for garnering sympathy in the masses, and treating Skywalker like a war hero, which of course he was, but with the arm being a physical representation of that, a permanent badge of honor. But in the case of Anakin's missing arm in the manner we are speaking of today, as a Sith, Sidious believed that it was the perfect way of instilling hatred into Skywalker. This obviously worked like a charm, as Dooku became the target of all of Skywalker's frustrations during the war. After the loss of his limb, and his mother in the same couple of days, Anakin was in a place where the dark side was drawing him ever closer. With all the terror, destruction, and loss the war was inflicting upon the galaxy, Dooku was the perfect face for not only the Separatists, but also for Skywalker's fury. He was seen as the ultimate villain of the war by the wider galaxy at large, and also Skywalker, which also made Anakin's public representation skyrocket, as everyone in the galaxy was invested in him. He was the hero with no fear, one to thwart the schemes of the vile Dooku. It was the perfect dramatic setup. Unfortunately though, behind the scenes, this conflict was a lot less noble and a lot more personal. Day by day, Anakin was sinking deeper into his hatred and need for revenge against the Count. He had to relearn how to use his right arm with his lightsaber, and looking at it every day would remind him of that horrible moment when he was humiliated by the Sith. Not to mention, it was a reminder of that entire week of his life that he spent in anguish. He would remember how only a couple of days prior to that injury, he had lost his mother. And then there was the arena, where a little under 200 Jedi were slain in the carnage, not to mention the beginning of the terrible Clone War. Maybe the only good that came from his arm was his marriage to Padme, but his fear of losing her constantly outweighed any joy that came from their relationship. His mechanical hand to Anakin was a reminder of the day that his life changed. His mother was taken by the Tuskens, and his arm was taken by Dooku. In Anakin's mind, the Sith Lord was no less of a ravenous beast than those raiders that had slaughtered his mother, and that he then slaughtered. It's interesting that it was Palpatine who equated the Tusken Raiders and Anakin slaughtering them to his slaughter of Dooku. He cut off your arm, you wanted revenge. It was only natural. Do you remember what you told me about your mother and the Sand People? Sidious very tactfully and ingeniously erased all of Anakin's conflict about killing Dooku by reminding Anakin once more of what the mechanical arm represented, of the days when his life had taken a sharp turn. This reminded Skywalker that to him, Dooku was no more than an animal, the same as the Tuskens. The loss of his arm was a very important moment in his Sith training. It taught him loss, something that made the Sith exceptionally strong. One of the most integral lessons of the dark side. In the Old Republic, many Sith masters forced their apprentices to kill someone close to them as proof of loyalty and devotion, wound them so that they could draw upon the powers of the dark side. The dark side is fueled by emotions, as that breeds power. A Sith needs dark memories and emotions from which to draw on. A lot of the time, many Sith were already found in a broken state by their masters, and didn't really need to do this ritual of having it done to them. But for those who hadn't experienced lost, or were being converted to the dark side from the light, as of course is Skywalker's case, a very powerful sensation of loss was necessary to begin that journey down the dark path. Darth Vader would actually grow to appreciate this lesson, and would teach it to every Inquisitor in the Empire by wounding them by taking one of their body parts, teaching them the same lesson that Skywalker had been taught. Vader would even teach this lesson to his own son, which we believe he had been planning to do from the beginning. The entire time Vader fought Luke on Bespin, he was trying to teach him and gauge his son's power. It wasn't a duel, it was an audition. Vader prodded Luke the same way that Dooku had done to him, encouraging him to use his anger and saying, "Only your hatred can destroy me." Sidious trained Vader well, because Vader trained Luke this same way. And the duel between Skywalker and Dooku, and now Luke and Vader, are mirror images of one another. The big difference, though, is the arm that Luke lands a hit on is Vader's right arm, and with an inhuman snarl, the Dark Lord finally shows a glimpse of his real strength and skill with the saber, severing Luke's hand in just 3 simple moves. The only thing here, though, is Luke took this lesson a different way, and learned something else completely from loss. He did not learn how to draw upon his loss, but rather how to overcome it. The loss of his hand and revelation of Vader being his father only pushed him further into the light, as he now sees the pattern of events that led his father to where he is now. Luke would not succumb to this in the same way Vader did, and his mechanical hand was a reminder that he and his father were not different, hardly at all. And it was proof that if Luke could overcome it, Vader could too. But anyway, my friends, this is why Sidious was not upset that Dooku took Skywalker's arm, as well as how Anakin losing midichlorians was not a major impact on his power. As always, my friends and fellow acolytes of the Force, thank you so much for visiting our archives, and may the Force be with you.